know how it's going to sound here, but I am really just trying to show you really quick some of the tools that you can use to clean up this image for restoration purposes. A lot of them we've already used for photo editing with the last project. The spot heal brush is one of those, so if I click on that and I make the size of the brush a little bit smaller, retouching, there we go. I can just click over things and make them disappear. Super easy. I can use that for bigger things like this too, most of the time. If for some reason that isn't working, if it's sampling the wrong area, you can use the patch tool. So I can take, for example, this piece here, draw a square around it or circle, drag it over, and it covers with that. So draw a circle, drag it, and it replaces with the exact same thing. I used that here for taking the before out of there, and it looks pretty seamless. You can also, for repairs, especially in these white areas, you can use the clone stamp tool. So I'm going to click on that. So once that's selected, I am going to hold down, you're not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to pick the spot that I want to stamp from. So for example, she's missing this shadow in the crease of her eye. So I'm going to hold I, I'm going to make the brush a little smaller, sorry. A little smaller. And I'm going to hold down I'm going to hold Option, click, and that picks it up. So this can go right in here. I might want to pick maybe a piece over here. So I can press Option again, see how my brush changes, and I can click and then bring that over here. I'm going to click again, Option, click, that there, and I've now filled in that crease. Now, if I feel like this part's a little too thick, I can hold down Option and click just up here and maybe move a little bit of that down. Maybe drop a little bit of that there. I also use this for her eyebrows. So I'm going to do Option, click in this part of her eyebrow, and then just patch it in. There we go. For a bigger section, like over here, my best bet is to use the clone stamp tool a little bit differently and a little bit more complexly. That's a word. I am going to clone stamp over here. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to click the corner of her eye. In order to get that in the direction that I want it to be in, I'm going to go to Window, Clone Source, and now I can use this panel to adjust. This button right here next to the W is going to flip it the other way. And then if I need to adjust the angle, I can tilt until it's the right angle for what I'm trying to do. So that looks really good. So what I'm going to do is now stamp, and did it fill in? Yeah, it did. It filled in right here. So if I do Command Z, that's before, and Command Shift C to add it back in. There we go. It's not that bad. And now I can look at using this. I'm going to turn this back. I'm going to turn this back to 0, and I'll close that panel. Now I can go in with either a patch or with the clone stamp again. I'll do a smaller brush, option, click, here's some of the black for the top of her eyelid. Option again. Okay, so I'm working my way through it. I can always, once I've done some, I can go in with my spot heel and see if that's doing more now. There we go. We're in a better position to make small repairs again. When I zoom out, I'm going to have a better idea of whether that looks natural. It still looks a little janky here, but I can go in it and fine tune those details. One area that you're going to have a little trouble with is the chin. I had a big old bad time with getting rid of these white lines. See how it's just replacing them with more white? This is definitely somewhere where you're going to want to use the patch. That is doing a much better job. Just be aware of how shadows are important in this space, because you don't want her chin to look strange. But I think that looks pretty normal for right now. This is pretty easy to manage with patch and with the spot heel. And her chest is mostly fine, but because of the necklace, you might have some little bits of issue. I recommend trying to spot heel away as many of the orange marks as you can before you start trying to heal the lines, because there will be points where the necklace shows up in places you don't want it to show up in the spot heel, because it is sampling from all over the image. But it's overall it's not that hard, or it's not that crazy, I should say. We'll pay attention to the edges and some of the discoloration, because there are spots where the pattern is going to be a little tricky, but ultimately, at the end of the day, because it's a pattern, it will hide some imperfections fairly well. Okay. Two last very quick things. When all else fails, there are two final tools. One is blur. So one of the problems I had earlier, or with my first stab at this, was there was some texture here that showed up in a weird way in the final. After I colorized it, it looked like when you get a suntan and part of it peels, so some of your skin is lighter and some is darker. So one of the things I can do to try to combat that is to use the blur tool. We want to use this somewhat sparingly, because see how it gets really, really obvious that that part is blurred and the rest is not. And it doesn't completely get rid of the darkness. We will, in stage 3, we will do some denoising, which deals with the texture there. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. I definitely wouldn't blur this much. See how that starts to look weird? I I'm going to delete those things. That's good enough. So if you're going to do it, I would just be careful about it. Maybe use a small brush, just so that it isn't as big of a deal. But that can be kind of a last resort thing, as can be your paintbrush. So obviously, this is very fine detail work that I don't think is really worth your time most of the time. But if you've got little small things that none of your other tools are really helping, things like this little white spot, I can make my brush very small. I mean, that is a 4-pixel problem, really, or a 6-pixel problem. So I'm just going to do this. See how it's very, very small. I can use the paintbrush, and I'm going to press the letter I, which opens the eyedropper. I can take this specific color and paint it in. But most of the time, I'm going to go I again. I'm going to sample this. I'm going to take it down to even fewer pixels. 1. I can paint individual pixels if I want to. But 9 times out of 10, that can be resolved with a patch tool. But if you're struggling and you really, really want to fix one fine detail, that's your way. But I would say try to use the patch tool, the heal tool, as much as possible, the clone stamp. So you take a stab at it. I still have a lot to go in the background and in her face. But you have all of the tools you need to sort this out. If you need any help in class, please let me know. And I just ask that you try to take out some of these things like the text in the corners. Happy restoring!